For his take on this, we're joined in the studio by Liberal Senator James Paterson. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Aaron. Pleasure to be with you.
So what do you think? The latest Fairfax media poll is saying that One Nation's at about 9.4% in Victoria. Is it something for the Libs to worry about?
Well, there's no doubt that One Nation has tapped into something. We saw that at the last election, and I'm not surprised to see now that they've got a couple of senators, a bit more media coverage, a bit more status of being in the political system, that their support has continued to rise, and it may rise a little bit more yet. I don't think there's much more to go, though, because at the end of the day, One Nation is essentially a protest party. I don't think they're ever going to be a party of government. That's a burden that falls on us.
So what are people protesting against? Is it because of Matthew Guy's leadership as a Victorian Liberal leader, or is it because Victoria seems to be heading so far to the left under the Premier Daniel Andrews?
Well, certainly Daniel Andrews has got a lot to answer for in that regard. He's leading the most left-wing government in Victoria's history, and there's no surprise that there's been a big, strong reaction against that. A lot of middle-of-the-road people feel very strongly about what he's doing, so I'm not surprised about that. But generally speaking, there has been a bit of a phenomenon, particularly in recent years, of protest parties doing well. The Palm United Party did quite well. In the years gone by before that, the Australian Democrats did well. There is always going to be a home for people who don't support the major parties. It's a bit larger at the moment than it has been in the past.
Let's talk about some of the issues for that, because Victoria is in a state of flux at the moment. You have the car industry either partially shut down or continuing to shut down over the coming few years with Holden and Toyota. Then you have Hazelwood closing down as well. Is this a regional issue where regional Victorians are heading more towards the Conservative parties, or is this also a Melbourne and Geelong issue where a lot of disaffected workers, unemployed workers, are now looking for someone to blame?
That's a really good question, and without having the full data, it's hard to say for sure. But looking at where One Nation's been strong in other states around the country, it does tend to be in outer suburban, regional and rural areas, not typically in the inner city. So in Queensland in particular, they do tend to poll better the further you get away from Brisbane. So it probably is a bit of a phenomenon of people who are a little bit outside that inner city bubble feeling a bit disconnected from it, and that's something that major parties need to always be very careful to think about.
Now we talk about Cory Bernardi on the same tack. Would you welcome a Conservative party, a further Conservative party in Australia?
Well, the best home for Conservatives in Australia is the Liberal Party. I mean, we are a party where Conservatives are welcome, where they are valued, where their point of view is really very highly valued and placed in good importance on. I mean, we're the party of free enterprise, we're the party of small government, of the values of Western civilisation, like free speech and religious liberty. So any Conservatives out there who are looking for a home, they can always come to the Liberal Party, and I hope that they do.
Those are the values, but we're seeing business confidence is low, we're seeing business investment is low, so the Liberal Party may say, we're all about small business, we're all about enterprise, we're all about tax cuts for business, but that doesn't seem to be reflected in how business is actually feeling. We're going to see what happens this Christmas, whether people are out spending. The Liberal Party may talk about these values, but does it have these values? Is it showing these values? And is it pushing people further away? Is the Prime Minister spending too much time talking about same-sex marriage and the cities? Is he losing the bush?
Well, I don't think the Prime Minister sought to talk about same-sex marriage at all. For one example, we had a policy of a plebiscite, we put it up to the Parliament, it was not successful, we've moved on, and I don't expect that will be revisited. You're right that the economy needs to be the focus and should be the focus, and that more does need to be done to get the economy firing. That's something that we're trying to do with the enterprise tax plan that we think will provide real boost to the economy and real wages growth and job development, which would be really a good thing for our economy. But we're encountering some political resistance to that in the name of the Australian Labor Party, the Australian Greens in the Senate. Until we're able to overcome that, we might have some more difficult waters to get through.
Is Trump to blame for what's happening in Australia at the moment with the Conservatives?
No, I don't think you can shed it just to Donald Trump, because I think it's something that's happening worldwide. We've seen it across Europe with a number of populist parties on the right and left doing quite well. Jeremy Corbyn and Bernie Sanders are just as much an example of this global phenomenon as it is Trump is. And I think we have to be aware that there is a bit of disenchantment with the political class, and we have to be aware that speaking plainly and addressing the concerns of voters in their actual lives is the most important thing we can do.
When we talk about these Conservatives, George Christensen, Cory Bernardi, here in Victoria, Kevin Andrews, have they been left out of the party, do you think? Have they been given a big enough say? Is that what is going on behind here?
Well, we always do need to make sure that the Conservatives within our movement feel like they are being listened to and that they have a say. And if they ever feel that the Liberal Party is not the home for them, that is a real concern. That's something that I think about a lot. It's something I talk about a lot. It's one of the reasons why I'm very vocal about freedom of speech, which is, I think, one of those core values that the Liberal Party must always defend, must always fight for. But there are other values too that are important that need to be...
Has the PM got it wrong on 18C?
No, I'm pleased with what the Prime Minister's done on 18C. He's given us a pathway to achieve 18C reform. by establishing a parliamentary committee. I'm a member of that committee, and I think it's a really good process. And I think out of the end of this process, we'll have a good reform that I hope can pass the Parliament and fix this issue once and for all.
Is there a risk here that the Prime Minister listens too much now to what people like Cory Bernardi have to say to try and keep them in the party, that therefore they lose the middle ground? And Tony Abbott this morning referred to always look after the base. Is the base of the Liberal Party the Conservatives, or has that changed now to be the people in the middle, that both of the major parties have to win over the people in the middle to get the most votes? Where's the base?
Well, Prime Ministers have a very unenviable task. They've got a lot of competing demands to manage, and one important part of that is the core support for a political party, which in the Liberal Party I would characterise as being under the Liberal umbrella, including Conservatives and people of other dispositions, but Conservatives are a big part of that. They should never be forgotten, and they should always be taken seriously and valued. But as you say, the Prime Minister's got a lot of things to manage, and that is the whole electorate and winning an election with 50% plus one of the vote. So it's not an easy task for him, but I think he's getting the balance right.
Let's look back to the 1990s when John Howard had to deal with the first rise of Pauline Hanson, a former Liberal, of course, who then started her own splinter group. It then imploded. But I think the lessons we saw from that period was that John Howard looked at what she was offering, looked at the fact that she was talking to a group of people, and he tried to win those people over. Should Malcolm Turnbull be doing the same?
Well, that was part of the approach, but also there was a lot of attacks on One Nation at the time, as you might remember. This time, I think One Nation is a little bit different. Pauline Hanson is certainly much more sophisticated in her political approach in the years gone by, and I think actually so far in the Senate that One Nation's been proven to be a constructive party, and we've been able to work with them, and that's been very helpful for the government in the Senate. So I think that there are some parts of what One Nation can agree with and can work with. There are other parts that we don't share, though, and that we shouldn't try and take from them. For example, I don't agree with protectionist policy on trade. I don't think that would be a good outcome for Australian people. It would lead to more expensive goods, less investment, and I don't think that's the approach.
They lost a senator, I think it was on Sunday night. What are your thoughts on that? Plenty of talk about the fact that people believe One Nation will eventually implode. Do you share that view?
Well, I don't envy Pauline Hanson's task either. Managing a minor party that new senators is a thing. There's clearly some personality issues there that I'm not really privy to, but we can all see from the outside. So I guess it just highlights the importance for all parties in selecting the best candidates and having good processes in selecting the right candidates.
James, thank you so much. Have a great Christmas.
Thank you, Ahron. Cheers.